Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. I am with my adenoidal assistant. Oh, he's nodding his head. I got it. His adenoidal assistant, Greg Kenny, who is doing the camera. Greg, you've thrown another interesting word at me. I don't know if it has to do with your adenoids, or I'm going to have to look this one up. I'm really going to have to look this one up. So, well, we're bringing you another version of Warbird Wednesday. We are locked in the hangar again. We are hanging out in the hangar. California is going through some more fun with the COVID thing. So Greg and I are out field tripping a little bit. And today we're going to talk about really one of the most prolific aircraft ever made, and I'm going to tell you some reasons why the post-war civilian flyers fell in love with the Piper J-3 Cub. Now, the interesting thing about the Cub is that it is also a Warbird, hence, Greg, Warbird Wednesday. This Cub had some claws. It was tough. It could bite a little bit, Greg. Greg is like looking at this going, yeah, really. But the Piper, the J-3 came from Piper in 1938. And, you know, it came out of actually the northern part of the country. But one thing they didn't do there, Greg, they didn't grow corn. And I have on my head, I'm so corny with this whole stuff, there you go, that I have my corn hat on today, and this is actually going to tie into, Greg, I'm going to toss this off camera. There we go, another good catch. This is going to tie into my stage 2 today as well. But Piper, and by the way, this aircraft behind me is a PA-12, which is a Piper derivative. But today we're talking about the J-3. Now, to put this in perspective, Piper from 1927 built 144,000 aircraft, 160 certified models. Now, the other thing that's amazing about this is 90,000 of those aircraft are still flying. Greg can throw up a plan view of the Piper J-3. A Piper Aircraft Company is a derivative of Taylor Aircraft, and that started in 1927, if you can believe that. They turned to Piper in 1935, to the name Piper, and then this, the iconic, the J-3, the Piper Cub, was built from 1938 to 1947. Now, where we're going with a Warbird actually started in World War II as the O-59, prior to 1942. Did you know that, Greg? There's a fun fact. And then it became the L4 Grasshopper, hence the corn reference. It's all starting to gel, Greg. I'm really feeling good about this. Grasshoppers kind of are little agricultural pests. Some could say that Warbird Wednesday for me is I am an agricultural pest or an aeronautic pest. I don't know. But it quickly became, with its as an all-fabric, primarily airplane, tube construction, 75-mile-an-hour cruising speed, and a whole bunch of, I would say that this airplane has Moxie. And what I mean by that is you can get this airplane anywhere. It's easy to handle. It's lightweight. It's fun. Why wouldn't you want to fly this airplane, Greg? I mean, it's a lot of fun. Now, to be clear to the aficionados, there are all kinds of variations and power plants for the Piper J-3 and the Cub. I am not going to go into everyone because they're pretty much as long as my arm, but there's a whole bunch of variants on the aircraft and on the engine types, but we're going to stick to its primary mission. So it became, in World War II, it got involved in a thing called the Civilian Pilot Training Program, the CPTP. Now, that was actually a program that was started up prior to the war, and what that was about was the winds of war were gathering. And the United States had looked at what the Germans were doing in Europe with glider and glider training pre-war to build up their pilot schools, and the United States was saying, hey, we got to get part of that. So that civilian pilot training program was part of that effort. This pre-war, it went into the war. To give you an idea of how prolific the civilian pilot training program was, Greg, they graduated 435,000 people through that program over the course of the war. By the end of the war, now this is a staggering statistic, 80% of U.S. military pilots had done their initial flight training in a Cub, which makes perfect sense as to why the airplane lived on and had so much affection from the people to fly it. It was forgiving. It was at 75 miles an hour. It wasn't too dangerous. Remember, we've already done some of the other trainers, like the Stearman and some of the other ones. And the reality of those airplanes is, what did they have, Greg? They had a little bit of a bite. They would come after you when you're flying them. And you could ground loop them. You could do terrible things in them to yourself and to your instructor. But in this airplane, trust me, an airplane all the way to an ultralight can kill you if you get into a bad spot. An airplane will bite you. But the reality is, when you get into something like this where the airplane is fairly forgiving, it's fairly simple to maintain, it's slower, so from a handling standpoint, you've got an airplane that pilots just fell in love with. Now, it also, in putting on bigger tires on it and changing the control surfaces a little bit and the landing gear, you could do what else with this, Greg? You could get the airplane in very, very tough areas. In other words, it's slow enough so it could land on short strips. It could take off unimproved areas, so it evolved into the war not only in flight training, but it also, this Cub, as I said, it grew teeth. It grew teeth. How did it grow teeth, Greg? It grew teeth in a couple of different ways. It was an observation airplane. So when it went into the L4 and when we were flying in Europe and places like that, it could go and observe enemy formations like that. I'm going to tell you a Fred fun fact in here in a minute, but to give you an idea, there were almost 11,000 of these airplanes made. And another Fred fun fact, during the war, there was a Cub in production every 20 minutes. Think about that for a second, how prolific those airplanes were. So they were producing them as the American Army move out, whether it was in the African theater or the in the North African theater, Italy, or into Europe. We needed, what do we need? Reconnaissance. We also needed reconnaissance in the Pacific. Although we had large expanses of water, you still needed an airplane every once in a while that you could get around and take a look. And that was something that the L4 excelled at on observation. But then it grew teeth. Now, can you imagine, you look at this, there's no armor, pretty much tube frame. What do they put on this, Greg? Bazookas. Now, if you know what a bazooka is, basically it's a rocket launcher. It's like an anti-tank round, and they would wire bazookas on either side of this frame. There was a guy by the name of Charles Bazooka Charlie. That's an interesting name, Bazooka Charlie. I mean, how many drinks you get bought with that one? Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter. He actually would fly around with his L4 Rosie the Rocketeer. Can you imagine the nose art on that airplane? Rosie the Rocketeer. And he would fly around and he would blast enemy tanks. He would go after armored cars, enemy positions. He became quite proficient at it, and he became quite famous about it. And so not only this airplane was never intended to have an offensive purpose. At most, it was an observation airplane. But like the necessity of war, it got pressed into service to do something else. Now, it went through the war. As I said, it was prolifically produced. Remember, about 11,000 of them were made. They found their way into agricultural uses, and they found their way into being bush planes to transport people around. They were incredibly economical, as I said. They were not quite short takeoff and landing airplanes, but pretty close. And that leads me, Greg, to my stage 2. Now, last week, Greg, I would classify that as a poisoning incident. That there had to be something wrong with that. But guess what? We're going back to Lester's well again today, and we're doing Lester's Fixin'. Now, this has pure cane sugar. 12, that may be 1227, 20 something on there. I don't know what that is. Again, all the usual suspects, tons of sugar. But Greg, to celebrate this airplane going into the heart of Americana, we are going to have some sweet corn soda. So now it ties into the hat. It all makes sense, does it not? I'm going to use my magnetic, non-magnetic can opener to do this. Bottle opener. And away we go. Oh, look, 2 for, oh. I'm already getting the sweet corn aroma wafting out of this. Now, what I want to do today is think about those numbers. 435,000 graduates of the civilian pilot training program. I want to salute those folks. Those folks went on, many of them, to fight in the war and became pilots, and they became really the foundation of American aviation, if you think about that, really in our lifetime. So with that, I'm going to salute all of you who went through the Civilian Pilot Training Program, the CPTP, and with that, I'm going to take a swig of this sweet corn soda. Greg is really on his edge with anticipation. Oh, yeah. Oh, Lester's Fixins is not the program. If this isn't as stale tasting as the one last week was, but I guess if you like sweet corn, we're going to do one more because we have to do proper homage to the people at the CPTP program. Do one more. Well, I'll say this for it, Greg. It's not terribly offensive, and when you open it, you could kind of smell the corn wafting out of the bottle, and I can at least sort of taste the sweet corn. But again, Lester's not a sponsor, but we want to salute all the CPTP folks. Now, interesting, some other sidebar on this. The Cub actually flew Eleanor Roosevelt. The British had a program called the Flint Fire program, which was a bond-raising effort. Those airplanes, I think, they were silver, as I recall, or kind of a silverish color. Those 48 of them, I think, went to the United Kingdom, and so they went on to American private life. But that was not the end of them, Greg. Before, we've always seen MASH, right? Before the end of MASH and the helicopters, in the Korean War, L-4s got modified to be litter carriers. American military thinking had realized that you had to get wounded soldiers to a medevac station and medical treatment as quickly as possible. In the Korean War, before helicopters could carry a lot more load, Cubs were still being used with stretchers, litters inside to be able to take wounded soldiers. At that point, they moved on into truly civilian areas in where they're still flying as Bush aircraft. As I said, the amazing thing about Piper aircraft in general, of that 144,000, 90,000 are still flying. That's just an amazing number. And the Cubs are one of them. So I want to do one thing, and that is talk about our gratuitous product placement. Now, this is a shirt. This is Greg's size, isn't it? It's the youth size. This actually changes color in the sunlight. It's heat sensitive. This is a great Christmas gift. So go out to our web store. I believe there is actually a Cub on this shirt. If I'm correct, there's actually a Cub on this shirt. So not only can you cover getting somebody a great Christmas gift, but you can also kind of show them the whole aircraft lineage there. So go out to our web store and pick up one of these fine, fine products. But the Cub is another milestone in American aircraft innovation. It's no different than the Boeing airliners. It's just an aircraft that was used for a different type, and it will go on as one of the favorites of American aviators throughout history. Okay. My name is Fred Bell. Remember, like us on Facebook, smash that subscribe on YouTube, and hit that like button. And remember, we can't rebuild these airplanes without your donation. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.